Hello, global gardeners. Welcome to the Black Friday edition of the Gardener Scott Show. I'm going to be talking a lot about gardening today, answering your gardening questions. But because this is Thanksgiving week in the United States, it's Black Friday week. And for those of you that don't know what that means, over the course of the last couple decades, the day after Thanksgiving, which is on Thursday, is a day for many companies to promote their products and offer huge savings. And that's been come to be known as Black Friday. People will line up outside of stores, but in our wonderful online world, there are a number of places that are already starting to have special offers, many more to come. And I'm going to highlight the ones that I know about in today's show as it relates to gardening. So sit back, relax. And if you're in the mode of buying something for yourself or for your friends and family for the holidays, maybe you'll be able to find something in the list that we have today. A big shout out to Heidi and Jay, our fantastic moderators who logged on early and are joining with us today. Hello to everybody, including Sherry's dog. Happy birthday to Sherry Ellison's dog, 4 years old. That's great. I don't know Mala's exact birthday. She's a rescue, of course, and she had a couple owners before me, and the paperwork isn't precise. But I figure Mala's about 3. And I saw something recently, particularly with rescue dogs that have their forever home. The day they arrive at their forever home is their birthday. So while I think Mala was about a year old, maybe a little bit more when I first got her, she's about to celebrate her second birthday at her forever home. And she was just at my feet, but got up to go outside. So it's always nice to give your pups a birthday present, and Mala gets presents every day. But of course, I'll try to think of something special on her birthday. Becoming a green stalker. Nice to see you here. And I didn't know you were Heidi. So Heidi's abound on today. That's fantastic. And the ladies' garden at home is Cheryl. So it's always nice to see who we're talking to. The thing about YouTube is it's relatively anonymous. Of course, I put my name out there with my videos, but when we meet on a Monday like this and we have our conversations and we chat, many of us are actually becoming friends because we're here every Monday. We've been doing this for a few years now, and we don't always know the name of the person. So thank you for identifying your names so that we can put a name to the YouTuber handle that you go by. And John is saying, like the picture, gardening on a slope. Yeah, this is the background today. We'll talk about this a little bit later in the show. I think it's wonderful to see all this green and flowers because it's cold and snowy and windy in my yard right now. And so today is kind of an indoor day, but I can look at pictures of other gardens. Phoenix Sullivan says, recently got a cheap plastic 10 by 20 poly tunnel to plant veggies in Oklahoma 7B. When should I put it up to ensure warm ground while mitigating winter storm wind damage? That's a good question. So, a couple different issues here. And yes, you're on the right track. Whenever you're going to put up a polytunnel, plastic over your hoops, even a greenhouse that you're going to be growing in, it is a good idea to put it up before you're actually going to put your plants in it so that the soil can warm up. And when you put the plants in, they're not going to be shocked by cold soil, especially if you're doing this during a cold period of the year. It can happen pretty quickly. Now, Oklahoma gets a lot of sun, and it probably in a period of just 3 or 4 days will warm the soil up enough to be able to plant in. I would suggest maybe a week, and in that time, take a look at what's happening in your new polytunnel. Put thermometers in there. That's what I did in my greenhouse. And so let the soil warm up over the course of that week, but also monitor the temperatures during the day and at night before you put the plants in. Because while polytunnels, greenhouses, hoops, and plastic are great for helping to give the plants a little bit extra warmth, they don't generate their own heat. And how well they hold the heat is kind of a mystery unless you're going to monitor with a thermometer what that variation is going to be. And so typically a polytunnel will give you 3, 5, 8, maybe even 10 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on how big it is, how much soil you have, if the soil is moist or dry. And those are all important considerations. And then Oklahoma gets a lot of wind and gets a lot of storms. That's the other part of it. Put it up before you've got plants in it so you can make sure it's anchored, to make sure that it is going to stand up to whatever winds you have. And it'll take a while to figure that out. So I say the earlier the better. Go ahead. If you got time this week, go ahead and put it up this week. Start some of that monitoring and documenting of the circumstances and the temperatures. And then when you've got seeds and plants ready to put in, go ahead and put it in. Now, the thing about growing at this time of year, for those of us in the northern hemisphere, there's not a lot of light. I did a video about this a couple years ago. It's the Persephone period, where there's just so little light during the peak of winter that most of the plants aren't getting enough sunlight to grow. So they really slow down. They might even enter a dormancy period. Be aware of that. And for best results, supplemental lighting really is a good idea, putting lights in your polytunnel. But if you don't have that, just accept that the plants are going to be slow to germinate, slow to grow, and it's not going to be until February when there's enough sunlight that will actually promote the good growth of those plants that you happen to be going in there. Leafy Greens is wondering if temps at night dip into the mid to low 40s. That's 40s Fahrenheit, around 7 Celsius. But day is still in the high 70s, about 23 Celsius. Should tomatoes be pulled? And so, yes and no. I typically start pulling my tomatoes when they get to that low point. There's not going to be any more growth. It does affect how well the fruit is going to ripen. But call me a little bit overzealous in that I'm hoping the weather will warm up again, because sometimes it does here in Colorado. But if it's going to be cold and stay cold and continue to get cold, and you've harvested all the fruit already, go ahead and pull the plants. Or if there's still fruit on the plants, that warmth of the day might be enough to stimulate the ripening of them, and you can get more of a harvest. The big factor, I think, in deciding when to pull our plants as the season comes to an end is, what are you going to do in that bed? And so if you want to grow spinach and lettuce and beets and turnips and all those cool season plants, if your season allows for that, then pulling the tomato plants early may give you time to actually grow another crop of some of those cool season plants. And those plants don't necessarily need as much sunlight, and so they'll still grow in the waning days of fall into winter. So the whether they should be pulled, that's totally up to you. You can also, if there's a lot of fruit left on the plants, pull the plants, hang them upside down in your garage. As long as it's a warm garage, the fruit will continue to ripen. Or pull them, and as long as they've hit that blush period where they've gone from green to just starting to change color, you can put them on your kitchen counter and they'll continue to ripen as well. If you don't have plans for that space, though, this is one of those things that there's no rush to pull the plants. You can wait until the freeze hits, kills the plants, and then clean up the garden whenever you get around to it. So, and there's Jay right on top of things with a post of one of my videos that talks about those kind of tasks as we get into it. And so let's go to Dusty Flats. Cut the broccoli finally. It wasn't worth going further with less light. Yeah, exactly. There does reach a point, and you'll see it. And this is one reason why I like to get out in my garden every day and hand water and get up close to my plants and get to know them, because you can see when they slow down. You can see that the growth really, in many cases, stop. And that's a good time to start thinking about doing that harvest and cleaning up the garden as you need to. So something to think about. And I saw Yankee Sister signing on. That was nice. And Brian, nice to see you here. Good to see Yankee Sister Homestead, of course, making a big Thanksgiving dinner with garden goodies. I wanted to talk about that. So thanks for broaching that subject, Brian. As we get into our Thanksgiving time, I hope you're able to use some of what you've been growing. And I think it's important, I'll talk more about this at the end, to actually use the holiday season and Thanksgiving and what we do for our Thanksgiving dinners as part of our planning process for next year. So there's a teaser. I'll talk about that at the end of the show. Becoming a Green Stalker has a question. Saw a video this week on Scaredy Cat Gardener that seed saving and sharing is often illegal. No, that's really not the case. So the issue of that is more and more there are seeds that you might buy that are patented or the name is trademarked. And so you can get that seed. If it is an heirloom open pollinated seed, you can save the seed. You could use that seed. The big issue is you can't sell the trademarked or the patented seed, because that's where the legal aspect comes in. And yes, it might technically be illegal, but it's one of those things that it's really not policed, and there aren't people out there to see if a neighborhood gardener is sharing seeds at their garden club. You can have seeds for your own personal use, and you can share them with other gardeners. Just be aware that if it is a patented seed, you're not allowed to propagate it and then sell those seeds or sell those plants. I can't think of anything that I have been growing in recent years that is patented. And so I have zero worry about that, which is why I save seeds and I make videos about saving seeds. And I encourage all the rest of you to save your seeds as well. So yeah, be careful about that. You know, there's a lot of misinformation when it comes to seeds and crops. I get questions all the time. I did a video, I think last year it was, and then I also touched on it this year as well, talking about GMOs. There are 0 GMO seeds sold to home gardeners. That's just the way it is. GMO seeds are expensive to develop, and they're only developed in agriculture that is at the industrial scale. So there are no seed companies selling to home gardeners that are selling GMO seeds of any type. And that also gets into the trademarked and patented seed. Farmers at that industrial scale are the ones that are typically using those kind of seeds. So for those of us that are growing our plants, saving our seeds and sharing our seeds, don't worry about it. And it's not going to be something that there's a seed police force that's going to come into your backyard and see what seeds you're growing. That just doesn't happen. So relax, don't worry about it. And it's one of those things that in the long run, the more seeds you can save, the cheaper gardening gets, and the more you can sustain your garden with the plants that grow well. Because if a plant grows well enough to provide you with seeds, that's the kind of plant I want in my garden. So that's why I always encourage it. So other things when we're talking about saving money in the garden gets us back to the Black Friday specials. Now I've got a long list in the description below today. These are affiliate links. These are companies that I've partnered with, and almost all of them, and that's why I listed them today, use a code. It's usually the Gardner Scott code that gives you an additional discount. Now, the nice thing about these affiliate relationships is if you go to these sites, it doesn't cost you anything extra. And if you use the code, you get a discount. And then it also helps support the Gardner Scott channel. So that's why I wanted to start with talking about the affiliate codes this week, because a lot of them, well, all of them are products that I use. And I know many of them are products that you use. So let's go ahead and start with Greenstock. So starting today, Greenstock is having their Black Friday sale. And it really is a good one. The 5-tier original tower from Greenstock is on sale this week for $99.97. Normally, it sells for $70 more than that. And if you use the Gardner Scott code, you get an extra $10 off. So you can save $80 in the cost of a Greenstock if you get it this week as part of the Black Friday sale. Now, there are a couple times during the year that Greenstock really has these big sales. Mother's Day sale is a huge one. They usually have a Memorial Day and Labor Day sale, but this one for Black Friday week is really hard to beat. And I think everything on the site, or most everything on the site, is on sale. So go to the link that I have below to check out the Greenstock. This is one of those, especially when you can save $80 on a Greenstock. You might not have been thinking about getting your third or your fourth or your fifth one, but they make great gifts. I've given 2 different family members Greenstocks as gifts. And when you can get them at such a reduced rate, it really can be a good Christmas box under the tree. And so think about that. That's one of those I really wanted to highlight because it is such a big savings. And so there's Jay on top of things with that link and the Gardner Scott code for a $10 discount. And Brian is saying, I sent a Greenstock to a friend of mine in Chicago that has a balcony garden and he just loves it. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, that's exactly my point. It is one of those things that I love them. I have 3. I'll probably get my 4th one this year because they've got new colors. But it is one of those things that when you share them with others, you've probably seen my videos when I shared the Greenstock with Eli and Kate in Scotland, and they love it. And I've made the videos about that because it's so much fun to give a gardening gift to somebody that truly loves it and is just so ecstatic. And Greenstock does fall into one of those categories. Now, for some of the things that are more expensive that you've seen me make videos about, and yes, they are the kind of thing you need to budget for, you need to save for, but Black Friday is the time to think about something like the Harvest Right freeze dryer. I've been freeze drying this week. In fact, one of the things I did, I didn't make a video about it. I did post a picture on my Instagram, but I still had zucchini that needed to be processed. So this last week, I shredded the last of my zucchini, and then I freeze dried the shredded zucchini so that I can make zucchini bread going into the winter. And so I shredded and freeze dried enough to make 15 loaves of zucchini bread. I love zucchini bread. And so I just have so much fun with my freeze dryer. And this week, with that link that I have below, there's up to $500 off on the Harvest Right freeze dryer. Now, yes, they're expensive, but that $500 off is really a good bargain if you've been in the market for the Harvest Right. So look at that link below. And then the other big item is the Planta Greenhouse. And so the Planta Greenhouse through the end of the month has up to $750 off on their greenhouse. Now, I know these are big purchases, and it's one of those things that not all of us can have, but if you've been saving for it, and I was saving for my greenhouse for more than 20 years, $750 off is a big opportunity to not have to save as much. So I got another long list of things that we'll be talking about as we roll forward. Thank you for that, Jay. Yeah, up to $500 off on the Harvest Ride. It really is a bargain. So if you've been thinking about it, check it out and just click on one of those links that you have below. Dennis is saying, I've convinced my wife to get us a green stock, and 99 bucks, I can't resist, and $10 off of that. So it's actually 89 bucks for the 5-tier original green stock. No, yeah, absolutely. I can't resist, which is why I'm saying that I may end up getting another one. It's funny how we sometimes get into that situation where we are wanting something and then a deal comes along and then you can't resist, and I'm guilty of that as well. But if it's gardening related, hey, I think it's worth it, because we're definitely going to get the use of it, or get the use of it for many years to come. And high bow tie life. Yeah, exactly. So this is one of those things. This is the first year that I've had my Harvest Ride. So I'm guessing, I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing that next year it'll be the same kind of thing. So for some of these bigger items, hold off, spend another year saving up for it. And next year, I'll let you know if they're having similar sales, and that might be the time to strike on some of those kind of things. So it's always fun to take advantage of that. So let's go ahead and I'll give a tease out, because I want to spend more time talking about it. But Epic Gardening, I've got a partnership with now, and they've got sales all through this week, starting on Wednesday. And so some of these Black Friday specials are Wednesday into next week, but I'll talk more about that here in just a little bit. So I'm still talking about gardening today. And if you've got a question, by all means, go ahead and throw your question out there so we can talk about gardening as well. This is one of those things that, the end of the season, I got my beds cleaned up. I posted that picture on my Instagram account as well. My vegetable garden beds, the main beds, the wooden beds, are cleaned up. They're ready. They're amended. It's one of those things that I'm putting the beds to rest for the winter. And today I need to pick up some more mulch so that I can get that weathered to be able to use for next year. But it's a little sad as we move forward for some of us as we're cleaning up our garden space, but it does feel good to get the space cleaned up. And so, not on a day like today where it's cold and windy and snowy, but I encourage you, especially if you've got time off with the Thanksgiving holiday coming up, use this week to get your garden cleaned up, because then you can just sit for the month of December and January and February and not worry about all the work you've got to do in spring, because you already took care of it in fall. So definitely take advantage of that if you can. Hey, Pat, thank you so much for your involvement and video on hardiness zones. Confirmed what I already suspected. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, I had a video that I released on Saturday this week on the new hardiness zone, the plant hardiness zone map from the USDA. And for about half of the United States, the zones changed to 1/2 zone higher. For some of us, like me, it stayed the same, but it's closer to that point where the next time the map is updated, I should probably officially be in a higher zone. And there's been a few zones that have actually gone down. It's all about the 30 years of data that makes that determination. Nothing else. It's purely mathematical mapping. And so from 1991 to 2020, that 30-year period of data that identified the lowest minimum temperature in winter, and then took an average over the course of 30 years for what that lowest extreme minimum temperature was. And that's how the map is determined. Now, it's important to recognize that this map is from information between 91 and 2020. And so I've gotten comments from people saying, I don't believe the map because these last 3 years have been colder than ever. Well, the map doesn't include these last 3 years. So even though you may have hit extremes in the lows or the highs in the last 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, that's really not going to influence the 30 years of data before 2020. And all this is a guideline. It isn't specifically accurate on every day of the year in your garden. It's a guideline for perennial plants and trees and shrubs that are going to be growing in your yard, and for you to have this guideline when you buy those plants or propagate those plants, give them to others, or receive them from somebody else. And so I'm in zone 5B still, close to the edge of zone 6A. But when I get my plants, remember it's a guideline, I recognize that it's an average of the lowest temperatures. And the lowest temperature for zone 5B is minus 15 Fahrenheit, minus 26 Celsius. And that's an average. I have seen colder days than that. And I've had many years where it didn't get that low at all. So when I choose my plants, I choose plants that acknowledge that it can get colder. And those are the plants that I prefer. So I prefer to get trees and shrubs and perennials that can handle temperatures down to zone 4, just to be safe for some of those extreme years. But as a guideline, it also tells me that I can probably get plants that are in zone 6. And if I protect them or put them in a microclimate in my yard where it might be a little bit warmer, then they might survive some of those extreme temperatures. So it's a guideline map. It's been updated. It's exciting for everyone who got to move into a higher zone, because that is saying that if you follow my basic guideline, if you're now in zone 6, then all your zone 5 plants are going to do fine. And you really don't need to worry about it. But you can start growing some zone 6 plants and probably have some success with it. So always fun time. Hey, Prepper Chris, nice to see you back. Sorry I've been gone for so long. Work's been crazy. Glad to see you all again, and missed you, Gardener Scott. And Prepper Chris is one zone higher. So always nice to have you, Chris. And we have missed you in all these times that you're no longer around. So I'm glad you could join us. And Tony from Simplified Gardening is here. Thank you for that contribution, Tony. Thanks for making that video so informative and perfect to be passing it on. Well, thank you, mate. I do appreciate that. Yeah, it's one of those things that, and I've made videos about hardiness zones that also talk about the hardiness zones of the UK and the hardiness zones in Australia. And so wherever you are, it is one of those things that it's a guideline to help you choose your plants as you move forward. And so nice to see Tony here. For those of you that might be new to the channel, I know we got some new people with us today. Check out Tony O'Neill at the Simplified Gardening channel. Tony just went over recently 400,000 subscribers. Congratulations, mate. And that is a fantastic threshold. So Tony has not been as active with the videos because he's a published author with multiple books. And when the next book comes out, of course, Tony will be a guest on this show. But check out the Simplified Gardening channel and go to Amazon and do a search for Tony O'Neill's gardening books. And they're great books, great reference books. So always nice to have you around, Tony, and give you a shout out. It's that time of year where most of our gardening is starting to calm down, and we don't always have the chance to talk to each other and talk gardening. So I'm glad we can be here. Bud's asking, thanks for posting the new hardiness zone map. You're welcome. Not much change on the West Coast. My question to you, is anyone else seeing their first frost average date move forward? Great question, Bud. And this highlights exactly what I'm saying. The hardiness zones have nothing to do with frost dates, and they have nothing to do with your summer growing. But you may start noticing a variation in your frost dates. there really isn't an official published map or source that I'm aware of that tells you what your frost dates are, other than the National Weather Service meteorological data. That's a good place that you can go, and you can enter in your zip code, and it'll tell you what your first frost dates are, what your last frost dates are. That's also based on an average, and I'm not sure if it uses a moving 30-day window or not, but I have noticed that my first frost date, when I go to websites like that, has not changed in years and years and years. But anecdotally, as I track it, it has been changing. And so I've noticed that the first frost date is moving forward, and my last frost date is moving backward. And so, for instance, I use May 18th as my frost date here in Colorado, first frost date. And this year, my last frost date. I use May 18th as my last frost date here in Colorado. And this year, I think it was May 5th was our last frost. And my first frost date is typically the end of September, September 28th, I think is what I have officially. And I noticed that my first frost didn't hit until the first week of October. So yes, for me in this year, I did notice that my first frost date was moving backward and my last frost date was moving forward, depending on how you use the terminology. But for the first frost date moving forward, uh, monitor it. That's one of those things about garden journals, and that's how I have recognized some of these changes in my gardens, because I'm keeping track of these kind of things so that I can monitor those changes and those patterns, those trends within my garden, and that really makes a difference. Now, coincidentally, one of the things that I've got on my list down below is the Tempest weather station. And so I use my Tempest weather station. I made a video about it earlier this year. I've got a link below. You can go to Tempest and get a weather station and get 10% off of that. And it's a fantastic all electronic solid state weather station, and it's been very accurate, and it provides forecasts because of the networks it links into. And as I'm tracking my temperatures in determining my last frost date in spring and my first frost date in fall, it's given me some very accurate data. And the nice thing, if you have a weather station like that, is you don't need to write down the dates in your journal. It actually keeps track of it on, and you can go back in your calendar and see what the temperature was on any given day. So consider a weather station when you're tracking some of those kind of things, because it can make a difference. It's like the hardiness zone map. It's a guide, and the first frost dates and the last frost dates are guides based on whatever weather station is near you that is registering those temperatures. Well, I think having a weather station in your garden is the best way to register the temperatures in your garden. And so that's why I actually have two weather stations, and they agree with each other. The Tempest is a little bit more accurate. And so as I decide when I'm going to put plants outside and when I'm going to do that last harvest and pull my plants, I'm using the data that I've been collecting in my garden. And I think that's the best way to make it the the accuracy that you're looking for to help guide your gardening calendar. This is one of those kind of things. Bowtie Life says a Tempest weather station is about the only thing higher on my list than the harvest right at the time. So I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, I've been really happy with that weather station. And yeah, between the green stock and the Tempest and the harvest right, I'm a very happy gardener because I probably use those three things more than just about anything else when it comes to my gardening world. It's as we get our toys, it is important that we have what we like, and it's for this reason. Bowtie Life did a lot of research on the closest weather station 1.5 miles away, and it's very different from my results last Friday. Yeah, I see it regularly. So my station is a little bit farther than that, and I was noting often a 3 to 4 degree Fahrenheit difference between what my garden is showing and what that weather station just a few miles away is showing. And so when you throw in fences and trees and buildings and elevation and all the different factors that we have in our own garden space, you're going to see that it might be warmer, it might be colder, but it isn't always exactly what the official forecast is showing. So that's something to definitely be aware of. And so let me throw out another one. If you're looking at seeds, seeds are always a good one to do. Now, survival garden seeds, I made a couple of videos with survival garden seeds. I can't tell you exactly what the sale is. I'm kind of prohibited from doing that until Wednesday, because their sale starts on Wednesday and runs over the weekend. But they do have some of their collections of seeds that are going to be 25% off. So I will put on social media and in the description of this video, this live stream on Wednesday, I'll go ahead and put that link to the survival garden seeds with the discount code so you can get the 25% off. Also, one of the True Leaf Market is a company that I like to use. I use the True Leaf Market cover crop seed blends, and I've made some videos about that. And that's also going to be coming up here in a couple days before it starts for real. So I'll put that code in the description below here in a couple days as well. And the other seed company that, of course, I really like to use. It is. I haven't seen that they have the uh, that's the Black Friday sales yet, though I think they're going to start doing it. But that's Botanical Interests. So I've got a link to Botanical Interests below. I don't have a code with that, but they should be starting some Black Friday sales this week. So look for that if you're thinking about doing some seed purchasing soon. Now's a good time to do it. And so Black Friday with seeds, with these seed companies that are having these deals that are great for collections, wonderful for the holidays, wonderful as a gift. But I suggest, if you haven't done it yet, now's the time to start ordering seed catalogs. I just ordered my catalog from Baker Creek. Get on their mailing list, get on their newsletter list, because I get emails on a regular basis from these seed companies that I get the catalogs from. And especially for those of us in the United States at this time of year, a lot of these seed companies are closing out their 2023 seeds or their 2023 plants. And you can get them on clearance specials that are huge discounts, so that they can start doing their 2024 inventory. So if you're not doing it and you don't mind getting a little bit extra in the way of the emails in your inbox, sign up for some of those newsletters. Often, if you, as you move forward over the course of the next couple months, if you order seeds from a number of these companies, they'll have a code as a new time buyer that'll give you 10% or 15% off if you agree to get the newsletter. And so you can see the specials. I've noticed this week in particular, Stark Brothers, who I've bought a lot of trees from, is having sales on a lot of their trees because it's the end of the season and they're selling them before the winter sets in. It's past that point for me here in Colorado, but you might be able to find some of those companies that are selling plants and seeds at the end of the season. So great opportunity. Black Friday might give you extra discount, But generally, this time of year is a good time to be buying a lot of those things. Prepper Chris is asking if I've ever grown toothache plants. I haven't. I believe that's in the mint family, and I I've thought about it. I've been planning a video for a couple years now to do medicinal plants, and I have many plants in the garden for that purpose to make that video, but I haven't done the toothache plant yet. So I may add that to my list and put it in this year so that I can move forward with that video that I've been working on for so long. It's one of those things that I've got a lot of videos I've been working on for a long time. It's just a question of when they come out. I'm hoping to have my asparagus video out this year, and I've been actually filming and planning that video for more than 3 years now. So keep your fingers crossed. I like doing some of those full tutorial kind of videos that take a long time. And the medicinal plant is one of those, and the asparagus is one of those, and raspberries is one of those. So hopefully you'll see some of those videos coming out this year. It's all about what I can actually get away with and put together. And yeah, there's Jay on top of things, the Gardner Scott code for the Tempest weather station. So that's always fun. So talking about the weather station, becoming green stalkers asking, do you have to mount it up high? So you don't have to. Now, most of the weather stations that we get our data from are measured at 2 meters high. But depending on your garden space, at 2 meters, about 6 feet high, there might be obstacles that could influence the readings. So, for instance, one of the main reasons I wanted to get the Tempest weather station is because it's much more accurate with the wind readings than the other station that I have. And so I actually mounted, and you can see the video that I did when I mounted it. I actually mounted it above my shed. And so it actually sits close to 20 feet high so that there's nothing around it that would interfere with the wind, since that's one of the main things I wanted to measure with that weather station. And so for temperature, you can mount it at any level. For rainfall, you can pretty much mount it at any level. For things like wind or UV radiation, you might want to be more selective in where you mount it. But it doesn't have to be high. It can be done. In fact, if you go to the Tempest website, you'll see a number of weather stations that are just mounted on 3-foot high fence posts. Others are on 6-foot high fence posts. Some, like mine, are 20 feet above my garden shed. So choose a space where you can mount it easily, and then also take a look at some of those things that you're interested in as far as the specific measurements of the weather. And that's why I went higher with that one in particular. And Sherry says, after 3 years, that asparagus should be pretty well established. Yeah. In fact, 3 years is the point that you can start harvesting. And so that's one reason why that video in particular has taken so long. I did a video 3 years ago that showed me planting the asparagus, but it needs all those years to get established, to get the root system developed, and reach the point where you can harvest enough that it's not going to damage the plants. And so this next spring is going to be that for me. I'll be able to harvest asparagus for the first time because the plants will now be strong enough that they can handle removing the stalks. And before the 3-year point, it's really best to leave your asparagus in place because they'll grow, they'll set up leaves. Those fronds that develop, I think, are a beautiful visual component in the garden. But they also are soaking up the sun's energy, putting it into the plant and the root system, and you'll have a much stronger plant if you don't harvest until about the 3-year point. So consider that, and keep your fingers crossed that I can get the video done. I had planned to do a video on rhubarb this year. Same thing, I'd been building up. It was going to be a couple years worth of footage, but I actually was traveling the week that the rhubarb was at its peak, ready for harvest. And right before I came home, had a terrible storm that just decimated the leaves and the plants. So I wasn't able to do my rhubarb video. Maybe next year. Well, I'll keep my fingers crossed for that. And speaking of rhubarb, Tony, I've talked about this before with Tony O'Neill. Tony O'Neill grows giant plants, and I've seen pictures of some of his rhubarb, giant plants. My leaves aren't nearly that big, and my plants aren't nearly that big either. So uh, I'm just happy to have a plant that does well, but the timing is important for a lot of those plants like the asparagus and the rhubarb. There's just a few week period in the spring when they are suitable for harvesting. And if you miss that time period, then you miss your harvest. So I'm going to have to I've already got a trip planned for March to see my son and his family, and I'm hoping that isn't the week that my rhubarb and my asparagus are ready for harvesting. We'll just have to wait and see. Bud's asking, speaking of saving seeds, squash varieties tend to cross-pollinate. So is it worth saving seeds? Yes, absolutely. So check out my video. I'm sure Jay will put it up here soon on land race gardening that I did last month. And first off, you can save the seeds of any plant you grow, including hybrid plants. Just be aware that if you save the seed and plant that seed, you might not get the parent plant again. And that's the big issue with cross-pollination, is if you're growing pumpkins right next to another type of squash, you're going to get cross-pollination. You can save those seeds and plant them, and you might have a cross between zucchini and pumpkin or whatever the types of squash are that you're growing. Go for it. The whole idea behind land race gardening is allowing it, in fact, actually encouraging the cross pollination and then saving those seeds, planting them, saving that fruit, saving the seeds. And before you know it, the idea is that the seeds you're saving are from the plants that are growing the strongest and that are producing fruit that you like because they're either prolific, they taste good, they're big, whatever the determination you use for saving seeds. Even though it's been cross-pollinated and the resulting fruit is brand new, no one else has ever grown that plant, it's now in your garden. And if it does well in your garden, then yes, it is worth saving seeds. And I've talked to gardeners who have practiced the land race gardening, and I'm starting to do it more and more. And sometimes that hybrid that you develop from the cross-pollination naturally is better in color, in size, in the ability to grow in your region, in your garden. And that makes it worth it. It may not look like a butternut squash. It may not look like a zucchini. It may not look like anything you've grown before. But after you've grown it and harvested it and eaten it, you may be a fan of that plant from that point forward. And then you save the seeds and do it all over again. And you might not get the same parent again because the genetics have not stabilized. But over a period of years, doing that same plant in that same bed with the same conditions, you might be able to get a stabilized genetic line that is unique and is best for your garden. So in that respect, Bud, yes, I think it is worth saving seeds. Now, if you want a very specific plant, if you want that spaghetti squash or that delicata squash or that zucchini squash, if you want that specific one to carry forward and it was cross-pollinated, then you might not want to save the seeds because you are taking a gamble. It is a bit of a risk as you save the seeds and move forward. You're probably not going to get the one that you want to save. So in that case, you'll need to take some precautions to avoid the cross-pollination. But experiment and have fun, or don't save seeds until you can be sure that it hasn't cross-pollinated. And it's a personal choice. I've done the latter where I only save seeds when I knew they weren't cross-pollinated. And now I'm moving more into the roll the dice and see what happens. And I'm hoping that I can actually get some good results of that. It's actually kind of fun to do that. Okay, let's see. Goose Stand Garden saying, I chose to use cabbage as mulch instead of eating it since it had aphids. It kept layering. I did something similar. I was growing Napa cabbage, still am actually. And when it came time for cleaning up my cabbage, I was able to harvest some of it and make some sauerkraut with it. But I've been using my cabbage as mulch in that bed. I left the roots in the ground so that they'll emerge in the spring. The cabbages are biennial, so you'll get seeds in the second season. And I'm leaving them in the ground so I can get seeds from my Napa cabbage. That's another way to avoid cross-pollination, especially if you're growing biennial plants like that, is you can stagger the years that you're saving seeds because they take that extra time, and you can basically every other year grow biennials that might cross pollinate with each other and still be able to get the true seed. But yeah, great idea. If you've got plants of any type that the pests get to and you don't want to harvest and eat, chop and drop, use them as a mulch. And especially like cabbage leaves, when they're still green, as they decompose, it's basically adding a nitrogen component. If you're also using like straw, use straw mulch. So the cabbage on top of the straw, it's mixing the nitrogen and the carbon and actually tends to hasten that decomposition of both a little bit more. And then the nutrients are released into the soil. So I think it's always great to put your plants back into your garden soil if you can. Rebecca's saying, I'm definitely a roll the dice and see what happens in my garden. I have a plant that is in my garden, don't know what it is, so I'll find out. Yeah, that could be fun. I like that kind of stuff. I've told the story before about a plant that showed up in my garden. I didn't know what it was, and it ended up being a cantaloupe and was the most delicious cantaloupe I ever ate. And didn't know exactly how it got there. I think it came in on the compost. Didn't know what it was until it started to fruit, and I was so glad I left that plant there. So, yeah, experiment, roll the dice. If you've got space in your garden and a plant shows up and you can allow it to grow, I think it's a lot of fun and exciting to get to that point where you didn't know what it was and then you discover what it was. That's a fun moment because it really makes a difference in what happens as you move forward. So one more thing, let's get back to the green stock stuff. So before or below my videos, you'll see the t-shirts and the mugs and the things that I have from the Gardner Scott store. Well, I have a code for the rest of this month. If you are looking at getting some Gardner Scott products, use GS 2023. That's GS 2023 as your code for 10% off. So if you've been wanting to get someone in your family a Gardner Scott t-shirt or I Kill Plants t-shirt, use that discount for 10% off, GS 2023. And you can get there either with a link in the description or by clicking on any of those pictures under my videos. And so probably not surprising, I do that. I give family members Gardner Scott merchandise. Why not? And so I actually haven't thought about doing a family picture with everybody wearing Gardner Scott shirts, but that's actually not a bad idea. I might just do that this year. My son and his family are coming to visit for Christmas, so we'll have everybody here. You might see a Gardner Scott t-shirt family photo in the future. Just had that brainstorm moment. That's funny. But yeah, if you want to have a Gardner Scott family photo, you can get that 10% off with the discount. Jacob Moore is a new member of the Gardner Scott community. And thank you for joining us, Jacob. That's fantastic. There are lots of nice perks associated with it. And it looks like you're at the garden training level, which is awesome. So for the training and the collaborator level, I do extra things like members only live streams. And so next Monday after this show, I'll be doing a members only live stream. So look for that, Jacob, in addition to some of those other perks that you get for joining the channel. So thank you. Glad to have you here as a new member. And there's Jay on top of things with the Gardner Scott store from creator or from spring.com. So, and actually, this week I'll be ordering some more Gardner Scott merchandise of my own to give as gifts. Just hadn't thought about getting everybody a t-shirt. Kind of like that idea. That's funny. See, I get benefit from these live streams as well when we move forward with all these fun kind of things. Sherry's wondering, do you have a video on saving biennial seeds? Oh yeah. Yeah, I just did a video this year on onions, on saving the seeds from onions. Onions are a biennial seed. I have some others. I'm trying to think what others I have that fall into the biennial category. I know they're there. My mind is a blank now. So yes, I've got videos on how to save seeds. It talks about the difference between annual seeds and biennial seeds, and then I have a lot of specific videos on saving seeds for specific plants. And onions is the most recent one that is about carrots. I have a video on carrots. Carrots are a biennial as well. And so in both of those videos, I talk about how you have to leave them in the ground over the course of the winter, and then they'll send up their flowers in the second year, and you can save the seed. So I've got at least those two. I know I've got at least one or two more, but it's escaping me right now as to which ones they are. So yeah, just go to the Gardner Scott main page and do a search of seed or seeds, and all those videos should pop up, because I'm pretty sure seeds is in the title of all of those videos so that it becomes a much easier search. So Smitty Smythe is saying, I'm saving Swiss chard seeds. They're a biennial as well. Same with beets. It's Beta vulgaris. So interesting. Yeah, I had planned a beet seed video to start filming my video this year. Like I said, I've got the cabbage that I've been filming. I'm going to release that video next year on how to save the cabbage, which is a biennial. I plan to do it with my beets this year, and then we had that extreme cold snap that I made the video about in my greenhouse, and that was enough to kill the beets that I was hoping would have a whole nother month to go. And I'm leaving them in the ground. Not sure if they're going to survive to next year to save seeds, but chard and beets are very closely related, and they flower and set seeds virtually identically. And so good for you. That's one of those things. I've got the golden beets that I was going to save the seeds for. So keep your fingers crossed. They're actually growing in the same bed as the Napa cabbage. Did that on purpose so that I had two biennials growing in the same bed, with the purpose of letting them grow into the next season to save the seed. So a little bit extra planning if you're going to save the biennial seeds, but certainly doable. And yes, I definitely have some videos that can show you how I do that. And there's one of them that Jay is showing, seed saving, 9 different videos in that particular list. So one good way to make it easy. Thank you for that, Jay. Guest and garden. Thank you for that. Thank you, Gardner Scott Advice. Appreciate that contribution. Always nice to have you here now. Thanks for being here. And I'm so glad I can give the advice. Haven't seen a lot of questions, so throw out your questions so we can definitely get your gardening worries. Not much of a worry anymore. So much of what I think people worry about, just a simple answer to a question. So ask those questions so that we can take your gardening worries away as you start your planning. And I think it is important moving into the planning for next year. And I've said this before, to look back on this year in particular, because it's the most fresh in your mind, and start thinking about what you want to do for next year. What do you want to do differently now that you know that onions and carrots and beets and chard are biennials, and you're thinking about saving those seeds? Plan for this next season to do that, and then recognize that this is a 2-year project. So much of what we do in gardening does become long-term projects, and it takes that much time to plan for it. And this is an ideal time of year to actually start thinking about that. And so one of the reasons that I put my background photos in place is for that. So you can start getting ideas and start your planning. Today, this photo comes from Denise Kelly, beautiful garden space. And I think that there's a lot. I'll point out some of the things that I recognize, but there's some really good things here in this photo. I had a garden like this. It was before my YouTube days, but my backyard was on a severe slope like this. And that's how I learned to garden, just like Denise is doing, where you've got your raised beds that actually become part of the terracing. So if you look at the lawn that comes off of their deck, the first bed is level with the lawn, but it's a raised bed. It's a bed that was put into the soil. And so don't necessarily think that raised beds need to be standalone beds out in the middle of a flat space. You can use your raised beds as part of the terracing. And I do have some videos. In fact, my carrot video was made at my previous house where I had many of my beds set up just like this. It was a slope, and the beds were built into that slope so that I was gardening in a level bed, but it was a dual purpose bed. It terraced the yard, so I didn't have a lot of the soil washing away, no erosion when you have a level terrace like this, but it also gives you space to grow. Now, the other thing, of course, is at the base where it's more level, this is where you can put your standalone raised beds as Denise has set up here. So I really like the way that this is done. And at my last garden, I did a little bit differently. I did an in-ground bed at the base instead of raised beds like this, but that's completely up to you whether you have more raised beds or you grow in the ground in that level spot at the bottom. But it's options to think about. If you have a slope and you weren't sure what to do with it, take a look at this garden. It really does show very well how you can do it. And one of the things I really like that they've done is wood. I love wood raised beds, especially when you finish them like this and they're all the same color and it matches with garden arbors and the wood on the deck. This is just a beautiful backyard where the design just really flows together between the deck and the beds and the arbors in particular. And you can see in the background, there are some raised beds on the upper level. Just below the deck, there's some raised beds. PVC hoops looks like they're their hoop of choice. So lots of hoops in place, ready to be covered at a moment's notice. So lots of good things about this bed. And I encourage that you take a closer look as we talk. If you look just over my head here, you can see pots. I always advocate growing both containers and whatever your primary form of gardening. So they're obviously gardening in raised beds, but there's no reason why you can't also grow in some pots. And then just above my head, you can see the big cattle panel archway, and there's some vining plants growing up that. So garden can be a number of different types of gardening and methods of gardening all in the same space. And I think this picture from Denise clearly shows that. So thank you for sharing that, Denise, and thank you for giving us all some ideas of maybe what we can do in the garden. I want to start doing this next year. I've mentioned before, this is will be the 5th year of my 5-year plan. And I have some garden arbors, these big tall structures in the pathways planned. And I'm hoping I'll actually get some of those arbors built this year. Of course, I'll make a video about it. So I like looking at pictures like this that give me an idea of some of those things that I want to do, but I'm not exactly sure what design I'm going to use yet. So I get ideas from your photos all the time. So thank you to all of you who have sent in photos. I have a few more left in the queue. Always looking for more. Gardner Scott at gardnerscott.com is where you can send your photo. Give me permission to use it. Tell me a little bit about it. Put it in landscape mode if you can. And if it meets all the parameters, I'll put it in my queue and talk about it when we get to this point in the show every week. Lily Cardoso is asking a question. I need to empty my raised bed to install gopher wire. Will this damage my asparagus plants? Yes and no. So uh, if you just dig out the soil and there's asparagus plants in there, it could definitely damage the plants. I would suggest doing it when the plants are dormant. So they're going to be going dormant in winter. In fall, they're still growing. Now, my asparagus plants, the fronds have all turned brown, but the roots are still growing underneath the ground. The ground's not frozen yet. And so it's best to wait until they go dormant and then work in that bed. And so, depending on how cold your soil gets, if it doesn't freeze solid, I would say late winter would be a good time because the plants haven't woken up yet. Wait until it starts thawing out in early spring would be my second choice. And then carefully remove the soil. You'll see the roots. When you buy asparagus plants, you typically buy them as roots that are dormant, that are dry. And so that's effectively what you're going to be doing. Just like the big seed companies, they dig up their asparagus as a dormant root and then sell it. That's what you want to do. You want to dig up that bed when those roots are still dormant, then put your wire in, then put the soil back in and put those roots back in and whatever spacing you want. And so if you do it that way, a nice controlled method, and you take your time, you should be able to minimize the damage with your asparagus. And they'll probably sprout and grow in no time, and looks like they've been there all along. I would not harvest in the first year after you do transplanting like that, kind of like what I was talking about before with the asparagus. The roots will be damaged. Some of the roots will probably be cut and die. And so giving it at least a year for those roots to get established after the plants grow is really the best way to do that. And so I wouldn't harvest the spears in the first year after doing that. But it's definitely something you can do. Definitely an option, especially for perennial vegetables like that. They're pretty durable and pretty hardy, and you can transplant them without too much difficulty. It's just one of those kind of things that you need to plan for and take your time. Bud's saying, I have 10 4x10 cedar raised beds. Starting this winter, I'm going to rebuild 2 of them each year. I have moles and voles, so any idea other than using the stainless steel hardware cloth? And so hardware cloth is better than chicken wire. Chicken wire will break down and they'll chew right through that. The hardware cloth is good and a preferred method. The only way to ensure that you're not going to have the moles and the voles digging up into your bed is to put a hard barrier underneath it. Now, I don't like using that really thick weed fabric, but that is one way to help. If you use the weed fabric with the hardware cloth, you more than double the chance. Now, they can chew through it, and that's why I would suggest using both if you want to use the hardware cloth. And then the next alternative is a hard barrier, uh, like plywood or galvanized steel or something that will take a long time to break down. Plywood will break down. Galvanized steel will break down in time in soil, but that's a hard barrier that is something that can keep those burrowing animals out. I don't like to have those hard barriers because I like to have that interface between the native soil and my bed. So I prefer to use the hardware cloth. But there's a couple ideas that that you might be able to work with. I haven't had to do it, but I do know of gardeners in areas that have terrible burrowing problems. I've got gophers, and after 3 years, one of my galvanized steel beds, I had gophers in it this year because they were able to either chew through the wire or find a gap in the wire. Who knows how they did it for sure, but I did have gophers in my bed. So it worked for 3 years. Others who have and around me who have so many gophers that there's no way they can just use a wire barrier will do a concrete slab. They'll put their raised beds on top of their patio or their deck, get them totally off the ground where those burrowing animals might be. So with that many beds, that's probably not an option, but that might be something to consider, putting a rock foundation underneath it, like the concrete pavers. That they're not going to be able to burrow through that, and it's going to take a long time for those to break down in the soil as well. So it's the choice of barrier, how much time you're willing to spend, and how long you want it to last, that really makes a big difference. And so, yeah, there's Heidi using the same thoughts. What about cement square stepping stones? Can still be a small space between them for drainage. So there you go. Heidi is always on top of things as well, having those creative thoughts. Lily Cardosa, thank you so much for that contribution. And you're very welcome for the help. I am so glad that I can help with answering the questions and providing any advice that I can and helping you all out. Now, let's see what other things I can give you as far as the information. Oh, I told you I was going to talk about the epic gardening sales that are coming up. And so these are some good ones. And so go ahead and you'll see the link below. There's also the Gardner Scott code at the Epic Gardening site, but they've got different deals with each day that's coming up, and it starts on Black Friday. So on Friday, if you've been looking for a birdie's bed, a metal raised bed, on Friday they're offering 35% off some of the select birdies beds. And as I understand it, that Gardner Scott code is an additional discount on top of that 35%. On Saturday, if you spend $250 on the site, you get a $50 gift card. On Sunday, some of their seed starting kits and grow bags are going to be 30% off. And then on Monday, November 27th, they've got 20% off the entire site. And so if you are looking at some of the Epic Gardening merchandise, consider that. And I'll be putting all of this when I update this video on Wednesday with some of those other Black Friday only events. I'll update it with those Epic Gardening things. And I'm not even actually sure if I should have told you about that, but cat's out of the bag. The one thing for sure about that Monday sale is because it's 20% off site-wide, they're not going to give you an additional discount with the Gardner Scott code. So the other days, the Gardner Scott code should get you an additional discount, but not on that Monday sale. And then I think I've got in the description below as well, the Forever Garden beds. That's most of my metal beds are the Forever Garden beds, and you can use the Gardner Scott code and get a discount there. So a couple different options depending on the metal beds that you might want to get. I did a video last month with the first of the Birdies beds that I have. And then I have those other videos from last year that I've made about the Forever Garden beds. I think metal beds, in that video, I talk about it being the future of gardening. More and more gardeners are going to the metal beds because they last longer. You get them in different colors. The sizes often match the gardens that we have. And so when you can get them, like at this time of year, at a discount, I say go for it, because that's one of the biggest disadvantages to the metal beds is they can be a little pricey. So shopping and getting a discount really can be the difference between whether you get one of those beds and not. So why not get them during the Black Friday sales? That's kind of the way I like to look at it. So yeah, there's Jay, the 5% discount using that Gardner Scott at the Epic Gardening shop. And let's see, Dennis is saying Epic has released what they are doing, so you're good. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I got an email a couple weeks ago that said what was coming, and I hadn't checked the website this week yet. So thank you for that, Dennis. I appreciate it. Now I won't lose any sleep over it. I do know I was specifically told with the True Leaf Market that I'm not allowed to say what that is until Wednesday, but I guess Epic is good, so that's always fun. And there's Jay with the Forever Garden Beds code for 10% off. And I buy a lot of things to make videos, to have my garden space, and I don't like paying full price. So don't be guilty at all for waiting for the sales and for using the codes to get a bigger discount. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the way I've done it for years and years and years, because I just don't like paying full price for things. And so when you can take advantage of sales like this, yeah, absolutely go for it. And yeah, Ruth Ann says the birdies really is a good savings on the price. So wait a few days and you'll be able to get some of that. I'm planning to add actually 2 more of the Forever Garden beds to match the Forever Garden beds that I have this next year. And then I'm also planning to get some of the Birdies beds. I got a whole new space. You haven't even seen it yet. A whole new space that I'm starting to develop as a new kind of a cottage garden. And I'll have a little fence around it, and I've got some apple trees, but I'll be using some of the Birdies beds because of the shapes that they offer and some of the sizes they have. So yeah, even I am planning on getting some more of the metal beds moving into next year. It's kind of like the green stock. Once you get them, you realize you like it and you start getting more. It's crazy how we all get in that mode of we got to have another tool, got to have more seeds, got to try another plant. There's always something new in gardening. That's one of the things I like about it. And so it's fun for me to try those new things when I can, and definitely saving for it. And Ruth Ann says the same thing on a gardening budget. Absolutely. Don't like to pay full price for anything in the garden hardscape. And if you've got patience, that's the big thing about gardening, is we should have patience. If we're a gardener, then you can wait. And I talked about that with my greenhouse, waiting for more than 2 decades before I got a greenhouse. And it was about 20 years, so almost 20 years ago. It was in 2004 that I became a master food preserver. And shortly after that is when Harvest Right began making the freeze dryers for home preservation. So it's almost 20 years that I waited to get a freeze dryer. So there are just some things that you have to budget or plan to put in your budget over a long period of time. But man, when you get it, it sure is fun. It really is. I'm actually giving, and I can say this because I don't think anyone that I'm giving them to is going to see this live stream today. So I had so many cherry tomatoes this year of all different types. Well, I made a video about freeze drying my cherry tomatoes, and I freeze dried hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of my cherry tomatoes, and I'm giving them as gifts this holiday season. So I love eating all my own freeze dried food, but I'm also packaging and giving them away as the holiday gifts. So what's funner than that than to give away the stuff that you're growing in your garden in whatever way that you can. So Liz G says, I'm in Norway. Green stalks don't ship here at all, and everything has expensive shipping. I can build beds with scraps of wood. So Liz, green stock has started selling in Europe. They're not selling in the UK yet, but they do have a distributor, and I don't know all of the information yet, but I do know that they've just started working with a distributor in Europe. And so I don't know where they're based, don't know what the shipping might be to Norway, but it might be a possibility if it's something that you've been looking at, especially in my videos and thinking, and all the rest of you in Europe as well. My Gardener Scott code doesn't work there. And so I can't give you a discount on the European green stocks. But I did ask the question, and they did tell me recently that they're working with a European company to start selling the green stocks in Europe. So look for that. That may be an opportunity. Other than that, yes, for shipping from the U.S. even to Canada. Now they do make some modification to their shipping to Canada, but it's just too extravagant to have a green stock shipped to any other country. But the news that they're in Europe now, I think, is actually pretty exciting. It's one of those things that could be fun, and especially if you're in Europe and you're making videos, you might be one of the first ones to actually make a European video talking about the green stock. So always nice to be at the leading edge of something in the gardening world, and green stock might be that kind of thing. Okay, let's see. Becoming a green stalker, they have a freeze dryer, and tomatoes are next on the list to freeze dry. Incredibly easy to freeze dry. I didn't make a video about it, but I freeze dried just my regular big tomatoes. My black Krim tomatoes, I just sliced and put into the freeze dryer, and I eat them as snacks. The same with my cherry tomatoes. I eat them as snacks. The one thing I'll be doing, don't know if I'll do a video about it or not, but I've got a whole bunch of my paste tomatoes that are in the freezer to make sauce. And so I'll probably freeze dry some of my tomato sauce. That's the cool thing about preserving the foods that we're growing, is you can do multiple preservation methods. And so the some of the tomatoes that I freeze dried from the first batch I did, I freeze dried the tomatoes, and then I powdered them, and now I have tomato powder, which I'd never really had before. But in addition to being the snacks, making almost anything we eat can be freeze dried and used for later. And so I mentioned the zucchini, where I freeze dry it, and then I make zucchini bread, and then I freeze the bread so that I can eat it in a week or two later without it going bad. And the tomatoes will be the same way. I'll make tomato sauce or paste, and then I'll freeze dry some of that so that I can have tomato sauce in a jar, basically the same kind of powdered tomato that I had done as a sprinkle. I'll make it intentionally as a sauce that you just add water to, and now you've got tomato sauce. So freeze drying is just so much fun to experiment with and have some fun with it. Lisa DeKramer is saying, I'm going to pull last year's tomatoes out of the freezer and go ahead and freeze dry them. There you go. Absolutely. And freeze drying from the freezer is actually a great way to do it, depending on how you froze them. That's actually a preferred method that's recommended by Harvest Right, is you freeze ahead of time, and then you just pull it out of the freezer and put it into the freeze dryer. So incredibly easy, and definitely a consideration when you do it. Ruth Ann's got 60 pounds of frozen tomatoes to make sauce. That's awesome. I think I ended up, haven't weighed them. I was going to weigh them when I took them out. I think I've got 20 or 25 pounds of tomatoes for the purpose of making sauce. But I'll have to weigh and see. But next year, maybe I'll get 60 pounds. Absolutely. Prepper Chris is saying sugar stuff hard to freeze dry. And so, yeah, the one thing, so like my cherry tomatoes, so when sugar freeze dries, it actually kind of gets foamy. And there's a lot of things that are fun to freeze dry that have sugar in them. The nice thing about freeze drying is, for most things, it comes out of the freeze dryer exactly as it went into the freeze dryer. Same color, same shape, everything looks the same about it, unless it has a lot of sugar in it. And the sugar does affect how it freeze dries. And so my cherry tomatoes, especially the really sweet ones, did have a hard white sugar foam on it. Still edible. It's not going to hurt anything. It just doesn't look as good. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Chris. It does make it more difficult to, or different to freeze dry. You can still freeze dry it. The results may not be exactly the same when it's got a high sugar content, but still delicious. Still one of those things that is a lot of fun. Sunset Gazing says you need to make more vids on dehydrating and freeze drying your harvest. I agree. I have to be careful, and so I think I did two or three freeze drying videos this year, and the problem is this is a big community, a big neighborhood of gardeners, and I got to spread everything. So I'll have some videos on fermenting, some videos on freeze drying, some videos in my greenhouse, a lot of videos out in my garden, because not everybody has a greenhouse and not everybody has a dehydrator, and not everybody has a freeze dryer. And so I try to spread myself across all the different realms of gardening. So yes, I agree with you. I do need to make more. I will be making more, but they're, at least for now, still going to be just a small part of my video library, because most of my global audience really is doing the raised bed gardening or the in-ground bed gardening, the vegetable gardens, and that's what they prefer to see the videos for. And so to make all of you as happy as I can, I try to make the videos that as many of you as possible are going to appreciate. But yes, more dehydrating to come. That I've been planning next year to do more dehydrating videos, talking about making some of those powders. I've got, in fact, just yesterday, as a matter of fact, I took some of my pepper seeds. I don't know exactly what kind of variety they are. At my plant club or garden club plant sale last year, there was a pepper plant that was just labeled Hungarian pepper. So I bought it, planted it last year, saved the seeds. This year, planted a bunch of those pepper plants in my greenhouse and outside. They did great. I saved some of the fruit to then collect the seeds. Yesterday, I packaged up those seeds, and I've got 100 of those pepper seeds. Next year, I'll probably grow maybe 10 or 12 plants. And the plan is to grow all of those Hungarian peppers. Now, there's no variety that I'm aware of that's called Hungarian pepper, but it grows to the size and the color and the taste. It tastes really good to make paprika. Paprika is Hungarian, and that's my plan for next year, is to grow those peppers, freeze dry those peppers, then powder those peppers to make paprika. And that's a long story to say. That's a freeze drying video that I'll be making next year that I'm already planning this year. And as I said earlier in this live stream, looking to this holiday season in particular, and as we are sitting down for a Thanksgiving meal on Thursday, for those of us that celebrate Thanksgiving, start thinking about what you're going to do next year. I'm already planning my Hungarian peppers to make paprika next year. As you're sitting at your table, if you love that green bean casserole, well, rather than buy a can of green beans, grow your own green beans so that you have a green bean casserole unlike anything you've ever made from a can. If you like to have the sweet potato pie, or if you like to have the candied yams, grow them yourself and then serve them at the holiday meal. I tried that. It depends on your family. So I actually made a candied yam recipe a number of years ago, all souped up with fresh vegetables. My kids did not like it at all. They still give me grief 20 years later And it's just one of those things. I don't do some of those foods anymore. But if you're creative and you want that extra flavor and your family wants something more than just the generic can that you buy from the store, grow it yourself and then turn it into the food that you're serving at your Thanksgiving meal. And I think the giving thanks, that's one of the things that my family does at Thanksgiving is we all go around and we give thanks for the things that are most important in our life. Gardening really is one of those things that's most important for most of us in our lives. We spend a lot of time doing it. So turn that into a Thanksgiving opportunity for you to give thanks next year to everything you grew and were able to put on the table for your family and friends. So I am doing more and more of that as I've been putting together my recipes and my menu for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'm making note of what I have to buy, and if it's something I can grow, I'm planning on growing it next year. You may see a video or two about that as we move into next year, as we choose the plants we're going to grow. That's a great reason to grow plants. And I've got videos on why to choose the plants that you grow. And this is something that I did not include in that video in particular. For the holidays, for those special times with your family, for those meals that you really enjoy sharing. It means so much more to you and everybody else if what you're sharing is something that you actually grew yourself. So, as you look in the seed catalogs, as you start figuring out next year's garden, I would encourage you to add that to your list of reasons for the plants that you're going to grow and maybe try something new. I hope it works. And give a shout out to Ready Set Homestead, who is here on a Monday. And I've mentioned the Ready Set Homestead channel before. For those of you that don't know, this is my son in Louisiana with his own channel. And it fits perfectly with what I'm ending the show with today, because his most recent video is about butchering turkeys. He raised turkeys for the purpose of Thanksgiving dinner and Christmas dinner. And he'll be bringing one of those turkeys with him for the Christmas meal, and I will be fixing it. And what can be better than that? That's exactly what I'm talking about, where you have that special part of your together time, that holiday meal that one of you took the extra effort to provide. So, thanks ahead of time to my son for being here today and for giving the turkey that's going to be part of our meal. And I hope you all can find something similar in your garden next year and definitely take advantage of those kind of opportunities. I will be back next Monday for another show. For those of you celebrating this Thanksgiving week, I hope it's a fantastic week. I hope you do have opportunity to recognize all the things you have in your life that you are happy for and thankful for, and carry that with you every day, not just Thanksgiving. Have a great week. I'll see you Monday, same time, same channel. And as always, enjoy gardening.